Stay for Dinner, a podcast of cooking, curiosity, and conversation. If you love cooking, hate cooking, you have no idea how you even feel about cooking because you've never tried it before, congratulations, you are in the right place. I am DC Pierson. I am a comedian, author, enthusiastic home cook, and my guest today on the show, Andrew Farmer, host of the Forever Dog podcast, Scary Stories to Tell on the Pod with Anna Dresden, writer for TBS's Miracle Workers, maker of so many comedy videos that you have no doubt seen. He's Andowed, he's everybody. He's been a friend for a long time, and I'm so excited to have him on the show. And in the meantime, we are in week 2, I believe, unless I screw up the order of these somehow for my own nefarious future me reasons, of the ramen project. I am making, I made tonkatsu ramen broth on the show last week. Today I am making chashu, the braised pork that goes in, or on top of, rather, lots of ramen. And something that's really pleasing to me about this process is that one thing rolls right into the next. Like, you make this thing and it's a big project, but then you yield some stuff that not only is going to be in the sort of final composed ramen, but then also you get to use, byproducts of it in the next little element. And that's what I'm going to be doing here today to make this chashu. I just took my ramen broth out of the fridge where it was sitting overnight, and in the meantime the fat had separated to the top, and I need to skim that off anyway so you don't just get a super oily broth. But I don't just have to throw it away, I get to save it and use it for the cooking medium for the chashu. And I love that. That feels neat. It makes me feel like a thrifty, I guess a thrifty person, but also just like a smart cook. I like that. I like that feeling. That feels good. And I popped open the plastic deli container that had a lot of the broth in it and was just almost like a little gelato scoop or something. Had a spoon just running across the top of this white fat, and I know that sounds gross, but I promise you the texture of it was really pleasing. I think if you didn't know, if pork fat already sounds gross to you, I think if you didn't know that's what it was, I think there are a few people in the world who would not find the process of doing it pleasing. And I was just saying to Haley, it's really cool to me. You take all of these very disparate, kind of crazy, different jagged elements. You had pork ribs and chicken carcasses and pork feet and all these different things, and you're cooking them for hours and hours and hours. And then what you end up with is just very homogenous, and it's just this very other thing. You're really distilling stuff down and yielding something completely different, and that is a testament to the cooking is transforming, and that's what we're doing here. And before I transform you into somebody that is completely bored by my musings, that's a good segue, right? Let's get into it. First, quick check of my ingredients. I am still working from the cookbook, Let's Make Ramen, the comic book cookbook by Hugh Amano and Sarah Beacon, and I am using their chashu recipe. This is going to yield enough for 8 to 10 bowls of ramen. I am looking for 2 tablespoons of fat, pork fat, or canola oil. I will be using the pork fat because, like I said, I literally just made it last night, so that's exciting. 3 pounds of either boneless pork shoulder with the skin removed, or 3 pounds of pork belly, about 10 by 12 inches. I have the pork belly. It actually was trussed up. It says you can use either pork shoulder, trussed, sort of like round rolled pork belly that's tied up, or you in a flat sheet, as it says here, often called cocoony. I have the last one. It actually came trussed up from the store, and I untrussed it because it's going to be quicker to cook that way, and I'm on a teeny bit of a time crunch, so that's why I did that. 6 cloves of garlic, 2 pieces of ginger, 1 chili de árbol. That actually I did not realize is like a bird's eye chili, or I think you'll often see them referred to as Thai chilies. They did not have those at the store I was at, so I just got a couple of jalapenos. 1 bunch of green onions trimmed and cut in half crosswise. I actually have fewer green onions than I thought. I have like 3 or 4, so we're just going to use what we have. 1 cup of mirin, 1/4 cup of rice wine vinegar, 3/4 of a cup of soy sauce, 1/4 cup of brown sugar, and 1 cup of sake. I have all of that stuff as well. So let's get into it. First things first, I am going to take a pot, put it over medium-high heat, and then throw in my couple tablespoons of freshly rendered pork fat. Pan should be hot enough now. I'm gonna scoop in my pork fat. Ooh, it smells so good. All right, now I'm gonna lay the pork belly in to brown it. It's a little bit of a snug fit in the pot, but not too bad. And so while that first side cooks, I'm going to mise my few ingredients here that I need to mise, starting by cutting my ginger into 1/4-inch slices. And I'm leaving it peeled. And then I'm going to smash and peel the garlic cloves. And just accomplishing that by carefully taking the flat side of my knife, placing it on the peeled garlic clove, and smashing down with my hand. Again, you know, being mindful of the fact that it's a sharp knife. Just makes it super easy to peel. All right, now that's probably been enough time on the one side, so I'm gonna flip this pork belly. Oh yeah, you hear that, right? I know you do. Now I am going to trim the ends off these green onions. I have more than I thought I did, which is exciting. And then cut them in half crosswise. Now I am going to combine my liquid ingredients and sugar. So that's the 1 cup of mirin, 1/4 cup of rice wine vinegar, 3/4 of a cup of soy sauce, 1/4 cup of brown sugar, and a cup of sake. All right, now it should be about time to flip the pork belly again. I've done it on the 2 big sides. Kind of, like I said, wasn't quite fitting the pot, so there's one part on the first side that I did that's not quite brown the way I want it to be, and I kind of want to do the 2 other sides as well, like the thin sides. So I might just flip it up with the tongs and hold it down there for, you know, just a second. And then I'm going to lower the heat, maybe even turn it off for the moment, and take the pork belly out and set it aside. So as predicted in the recipe, we've gotten a pretty decent amount of excess fat that's rendered off from the pork belly, so we're going to pour a little bit of that out, leaving just a few tablespoons in the pan. And now I'm going to throw the aromatics in and give those a classic little 1-minute stir around to unlock their flavor and aroma. Turn my heat back on. So that's the garlic, green onions, the ginger, and lest I forget, the chili. All right, and then we're going to, those are nice and aromatic, so going to tip in the liquid ingredients. Whew, yum. And the sugar, and stir until the sugar is dissolved. And we're getting a good, you can tell the sake and mirin, like the alcohol is burning off. Kind of deglazing the pan. All right, that's feeling dissolved, I think, as far as I can tell. And you just know it's going to be such a flavorful cooking liquid, because look at all that flavor we just put in there. Then the recipe says return the pork to the pot, nestling it amongst the other ingredients. Return to a simmer, then lower the heat, lower to maintain a slow, steady simmer, and cover tightly. Wow, yum. And then we are going to probably lower the heat even more. Simmer's looking a little fast. Then we're going to cover it and then flip it every 30 minutes. And it says that to get to the right internal temperature, this like flat of pork belly shouldn't take more than an hour. So we'll see. Check in like half an hour. And in the meantime, we'll do some cleaning up. All right, so my timer just went off. I am going to flip the pork belly and baste it in some of the liquid. Ooh, yeah, I mean, it smells really, really good. I'm trying to kind of press down because it's not the way that it's structured. It kind of curled a little bit, and now it's on the side where now if it was in there like a smile, now it's in there like a frown, like an arch. I'm trying to press down. Basting in the liquid. Pop the top back on, and I raise the heat a little bit. Just try to get that, make sure that simmers consistent in there. And let it go for another half an hour and see where we're at. All right, so my timer just went off. It's been about an hour. Just about how long it's supposed to be, so we're going to see if it yields to a poke from a chopstick. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, it did a little poke and in a couple places and it went right through. So we're feeling good about that. Now just to take it off of the heat and let it cool to room temperature, and then on the day or night, we'll slice it as needed and then brown the slices quickly in a hot pan, and then top the ramen with it. Looking forward to that, and you should be looking forward to Andrew Farmer. Enjoy. Well, Andrew Farmer, thank you so much for joining me. Obviously, we cannot share a real physical meal during this time, so all I can do is hope that the last thing that you ate was both delicious and satisfying.
It was, actually. Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here.
What'd you have?
So let's see. I must admit, I've been cooking a lot more often, but last night, my husband Chris and I did order. We ordered from Spitz, which is this like place. It's like a very unappealing titled restaurant, I know, but it's like a Mediterranean kebab place, and I had a very nice salad.
Nice. I love Spitz.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I miss being able to go there, but
great atmosphere at Spitz. It's got kind of a like, tell me if this feels off base to you. It feels like a cool college town bar that's a kebab place.
Yes, that is correct. It is very much a sitcom set of a restaurant.
Yes. Exactly. Just like where people come and they haven't told each other that they were going to meet each other there, but they just like somehow meet and hang out, or they get there without ever saying like what time they were going to be there. They're
right.
Just, okay, they're there.
Right. We somehow know like the short order cook who knows every fact about our lives too.
Oh, Ricky
the Spitz.
And then years later, you're like, the actor that played Ricky like won an Oscar.
Yeah, I know. And his wife, his ex-wife, started that cult. I mean, it was really a crazy
Spitzium.
Yeah. Oh no. Well, there we go.
Yeah, sounds gross, but great place. Shout out to Spitz. Thank you for supporting them during this time.
Our pleasure. I feel like we've been single-handedly keeping most of the Los Feliz restaurants near us afloat.
And that's, I mean,
It is really, I don't know, it's hard. It's like it's really important, but this is, that we were talking about it a little bit before we started recording, but yeah, it's kind of the place that we've all been forced collectively, is just sort of like having to feel a little bit guilty if we're not always supporting literally every business that's out there that still exists, because we have to, because there's no other, doesn't seem to be anything else coming. So we all just have to feel a little bit extra guilty about every meal we're not eating out, which I guess could be way worse.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I feel so bad because so many of the places in our neighborhood have gone out of business that I really love. I mean, I'm now naming like two kind of ludicrously named restaurants, but Cougart, which I really liked a lot, which was another Mediterranean place. I never know how to pronounce it. Are you familiar with this, DC?
Yes, I did. It was a weird thing where I would drive by it a bunch.
Yes.
And I would always laugh at the name, because I also don't know how it was officially pronounced.
Yes.
But you would drive by, for people that were not, don't live in LA or didn't in the era of Cougart.
Right.
The font also was very distinct. It
Yes.
almost looked like it should be the font on a like 70s, like hang in there kitty poster, or like
Very much so, yeah.
and it just said, so you drive by, and to me it just looked like Cougart,
Yes,
which I just thought
yeah.
like uniquely unappealing name.
No,
right?
In no language is anyone like, ooh.
And so I remember I just had like almost a year of just kind of like making fun of it. And I remember one time my improv teammate, Ben Rogers, being like, I had dinner tonight at Cougart. It was great. And I was like, oh, is it good? He's like, yeah, I go there all the time. It's fantastic. It's the best. And I was like, oh, the name is silly. He's like, yeah, it doesn't matter. It's really, really good. You should go there. And then have since gone to Cougart or whatever it is. And yeah, it was great. And it's a bummer that I feel like they rebranded and then now they're just closed, or is it just rebranded and now it's a different place? Or
I don't know. I've not had any luck finding, or I guess I haven't walked by it in a while. So it might be a new place, but I think once the sign is gone, I feel like it's new owners, because like no new Mediterranean spot has popped up in any of the like apps, or when you like search online for Mediterranean close by. I mean, the other weird thing. So what I loved about, so I'm assuming that the pronunciation that they're going for was Cougart, which is the worst of all three, really.
Oh, like cucumber and yogurt.
Cucumber yogurt. But the funny thing was, if you didn't know that that's what was happening, on the menu they describe every single dish in great detail except for the Cougart. Like it's just like Cougart, and that's it. Like they're begging you to either ask the question or assume that this is like an age-old topping that has stand the test of time.
Because that's just tzatziki, right? Like
I think
that's all that is.
I think it is, but without maybe any of the like herbs in it. It's just like they're
Gotcha.
just giving you yogurt and cucumber.
Gotcha.
I and to be honest, I never ordered it. I was too, because tzatziki was also an option, but I was just like,
interesting.
I can't do
So
it.
I must be off base. It must have just purely been Cougart is its own thing, and it feels like a brainstorm somebody had. Like it really feels like we should not speak ill of the long gone establishment, but it does feel like an idea that a dad had that he couldn't be talked
Yes.
out of, or he was just like, he's convinced, he's like, this is the thing. And everybody else is like, no, but you see, and he's like, no, you don't understand. It's cucumber and yogurt. I feel like that's what people are missing.
Because even if, and we, you were talking about the font and color, because yeah, it was like a very fresh yellow sign, and one would assume, I was living under the assumption for a long time in the neighborhood that it was like a frozen yogurt place, and it was a take on like line up for yogurt, like Q-gurt, like, or
like a stage manager or Ed Harris in Truman Show
Exactly.
being like, and cue the yogurt.
Yeah, so I it took me a long time, and then when Chris and I went in for the first time, we only went in person once. We had to order from that point forward because Chris spilled a whole large orange soda immediately on the floor, which typically I am the much more clumsy person in the relationship. So the only reason that I'm repeating this is because that's the only time Chris has done anything clumsy, and virtually any other time something is spilled or broken or crunched, it is me.
Did they seem chagrined by it? Like, did you guys really get the impression like we can't be seen here again?
I mean, here's the thing. They were nothing but lovely. Truly great customer service. They 1,000 times they were like, "Oh no, it's totally fine. Like, we'll get you a new soda." But it was just the way in which it fell to the ground and just went in every possible direction. I don't think I've experienced since like a Pizza Hut pizza party when I was like 7 or 8. You know, just a full, absolutely to the brim, not a sip taken out of, you know, massive cup just everywhere on the ground.
And isn't there something so primally sad about a spill, you know, like when it's just like, even though it's like, it's not like this is like precious liquid. I mean, don't get me wrong.
Right.
I love orange soda, but like it's coming from a fountain right here.
Right.
But just the idea of it just like, oh, it goes everywhere and it gets on stuff. And then it's just like sad, you know?
Yeah, we take such a risk every time we drink soda because the return is fine, and I enjoy soda too. But if you spill a whole thing of soda, that it's just going to be sticky. There's no method I've found of cleaning up that's not going to result in a stick that lasts at least 2 or 3 weeks.
And I really like I mean, this is not something I've experienced in a long time. Haley and I were just getting wistful the other night over, she just out of nowhere just went like, ooh. And I was like, what happened? It was also that thing that I'm sure you guys have experienced as well during this time where one of you will just like see something, you'll be looking at your phone and be like, oh no, or something. And then the other person's like, what is it? Cause you're like, is Trump like calling out the troops? Like what's happening? And then the other person will just be like, somebody posted this dumb thing, or you know what I mean? Like it'll just be, or like, oh no. And it's a facetious sort of like, they have a new ice cream thing at the place that we order out from. We have to get it, you know, like that kind of thing. But she just had a like, oh no. And I was like, what is it? She's like, movie theater popcorn. Just like, I miss it, you know?
Yeah.
But I miss like a big movie theater soda, but what I don't miss, I will say, is I really would like to like get a way too big soda and then just like nurse it throughout and probably have like a third of it to drink like on the car ride home. And then by the time you're talking like a 3.5 hour fountain soda at that point, and these cups are not built to last. So it's just like, by the time I'm home and I'm like finishing the dregs of this soda, the cup is actively dissolving. Like the top will not stay on. It collapses every time you pick it up. That has been, I've never had like a true spill disaster from one of those, but I have had a couple of like very close hiccupy. We're walking to the car at the Grove and I like almost just spill a soda on myself in front of a bunch of like cool Glendale teenagers.
Yeah.
Which would really be like social suicide for me as an adult with teens I don't even know or hang out with.
DC, I cannot stress to you the amount of times I've spilled soda on myself in front of teenagers. In Chipotle's alone. Like, I don't know what it is about Chipotle. I think the cups are a little slippier. I don't know what the math of this is, but I've spilled many a soda on myself. Very rarely resulting in a big mess that would require someone to come out with a mop, but enough that I look like a total fool.
Well, and also I will say part of that has to be, and I know this because you and Haley, my wife, were on the same college improv team. That was basically your guys' like office. Like that was your WeWork. Am I wrong?
Oh, I mean, that was when we were feeling like adult and sophisticated. Sometimes it was about going to, which Haley will know very well, Cozy Soup and Burger, which is a greasy spoon on the NYU campus.
So good.
And I don't know. I've been there so many times, and so many times post my adult life, which is also embarrassing to say. But,
I mean, not post your adult life.
Sorry. Yeah, so I am 1,000 years old. Post my college life. I think the thing about Cozy Soup and Burger is there's something about the quality of light. Enough like grime and grease has built up between the fluorescent light and the glass that the quality of light it creates is something that I've not found in a restaurant anywhere else in the world. I don't think there's lighting like that in eating establishments anymore.
Certainly, yeah, certainly not in like modern day Manhattan. I think a big part of it too is like the glint of a neon sign off of a like framed photo of Fisher Stevens. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, it is that place where it's like, you're like, why, how logistically, how do these signed photographs get here? And,
Right.
and why is it like Fisher Stevens, Candace Bergen, a weatherman who was like killed in a grimy like Times Square like shooting in 1984, like, and that's it, you know.
Fisher Stevens is the exact type of celebrity that is featured in Cozy Superburger, which is like someone who is good, had like maybe a really great year, but then I'm just curious about the likelihood of that person carrying around a headshot of themselves.
Right,
know?
exactly. It feels like it's like, okay, you caught whoever this is between that initial huge stardom in their now sort of like, oh, they're on like a cool HBO show now, you know, like in 2020, people are like, oh, they're a cool actor. You caught them in like 1998.
That's, and similarly, have you been to Palermo? I assume you have.
Palermo's on Los Feliz, right?
It's on Vermont.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Yes, I have.
So this is a real kind of 1970s Italian restaurant that, it's like an exorbitant amount of noodles, like nothing really genuinely Italian, but like you go there's a lot of vines. There's a person who goes around with an accordion. But the weird feature of that, a restaurant, is similarly to Cozy Superburger, a lot of celebrity headshots, and I might be crazy. This might just be like a face blindness thing. I have a theory that many of those celebrities are pictures of actual celebrities that are like Shelley Duvall, Robert Altman, like. But then the names do not match. Like, there is a picture, I am so positive, of Shelley Duvall, and the name underneath it is not Shelley Duvall.
Do we think that it's like that there was a sort of like allowable, like, okay, everybody knows in Hollywood in like 1979 that it's okay for Shelley Duvall's accountant to sign a picture of Shelley Duvall as long as she's signing her own name, because she does Shelley Duvall's taxes.
Right, that's true. If you handle the money of the celebrity whose headshot is, you get to sign it. That's the
Because you
rule.
also got to think about it. It's like, okay, so this is, if you're talking about the 60s or, like maybe like the 70s, 80s, Los Feliz is not like it's more of it's not to say it's like a working class neighborhood per se, but it's like, it's less of a sort of like enclave of showbizy, like people, I think, than it is now. I'm imagining it's just like normal families and people that are just like, look, but we are in LA. I'm going to sign this headshot of Shelley Duvall because I do her dry cleaning.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
we have signed photos at my place of business as well.
I'm always amazed by it. I mean, even if it's a real celebrity, I don't know the logistics. I don't know like what the game plan looks like in signing a headshot and leaving it at a restaurant. Like, does the restaurant request it? Does your like press person work it out ahead of time? Does like the restaurant ask and then you mail the thing to them later? I feel like you exactly right. I think what has to happen is it's 1985. Mm-hmm. You've come in there like 3 times because you like live in New York, but you're like renting a place around the corner and you're like, okay, I'm going to this little Italian spot with the person you're having an affair with. And they finally are like, hey, would you mind sending us a signed photo? And you're like, and then you call your answering service for some reason. Right.
And then before you know it, like, yeah, you're Mike Ovitz, who's like a low level agent at this time, who's your agent, sends the restaurant a signed photo of you, but he's signed it. So that's why this picture of Charles Grodin says Mike Ovitz. If you were listening.
Yeah, Charles Grodin. Wow. Yeah, you're really hitting all of the restaurant headshots most likely to see.
The people most likely to restaurant headshot. There is something though about that style of restaurant that's just so restaurant-y, whether or not they actually have signed photos or like whether it's Cozy Superburger or Palermo, because I wouldn't necessarily say those are the same genre of restaurant at all, but there's just like, I feel like they're not making restaurants like that anymore, or at least not in like, maybe not like on the coasts. They're not. I don't know if they're, but even, worldwide, it feels like they're not really like just making that kind of restaurant anymore. And it's a bummer.
Yeah, I do have some degree of comfort in that. I'm from a small town in New Hampshire, and I like, there's something about New Hampshire where it's like, they're just always 15 years behind, which is kind of comfortable. Like, I find that very charming. I don't mean like, it's not about being like uncultured or anything, but like, I definitely felt like I lived in the 80s for a lot long. Like, I didn't live in the 80s at all in New Hampshire, but I felt as though my whole time in New Hampshire was spent in the 80s, because it was still very much like arcades, and everyone had very big hair. It was just like everything kind of stayed longer. And still in Laconia, New Hampshire, there are several restaurants. There's one called the Soda Shop. There's one called Hector's, that are like the exact type of restaurant that just doesn't, it's never going to, no one's going to, like you said, no one's going to open a restaurant like that now. But like, it's a place where exotic things on the menu are like nachos, like anything with like a peanut dressing. Like, that's where it's like, this is new and exciting. But it's like, you don't go there. You don't go to those places for those things. You go for like a patty melt, a root beer float, maybe onion rings, but even that's getting a little too snazzy. You might just want to stick with fries.
And if you're a kid, you go to like slip underneath the table and then like run out and buy like some candy from the little like tourney handle candy thing in the like reservation era or reservation area. Here's something though. Speaking of eras, did you find, I feel like I spent so much of my childhood in restaurant waiting areas.
Yes.
Where I'm like, did my parents not? I know because they would go out to dinner like themselves. Like, we would have like reservations and stuff. Like, why was that? Was it just less efficient? Were people, did it just feel like I was because I was a kid? Like, why were we waiting in restaurant waiting areas so much?
I wonder if it is a thing. And I haven't worked. I have to confess, I have never worked at a restaurant. But I wonder if an element of it is where we have those memories as children, because somehow seating families with children is like a different, that's like a different thing, right. They've got to wait until a table opens up, or they've got to wait until they can get like a kid's chair or something. I don't know. But I have the same memory. A lot of like waiting on one of three, kind of faux leather, red or green chairs with like brass, like iron, like, it just is everyone had the same waiting room chairs back then.
Yes. And there were like maybe like some magazines or maybe a menu that you could look at. And like some, like maybe a single arcade game or just some other sort of like entertainment or candy machine that the restaurant had been sold on. And just like I don't remember like being like, oh, I'm so hungry. I just remember being desperate to like sit down. Like, let's just get this over with.
Yeah, I think there's something to like, it's funny because these are places, if we're on the same page, that wouldn't have like a bar. Like, our parents wouldn't be like, well, we'll get a drink while we wait. I also think maybe an element of it is when you have kids and you're taking them to restaurants, you're usually going at an earlier time, and it just tends to be more packed, at like 6 p.m. on a Friday versus like if you were going at like 9 p.m.,
Right. That makes sense. I mean, I think like all of the, as I'm thinking about it, all of the answers like are right there. Like you're saying, it's like, okay, it's more people. Yeah. It's annoying. Like, we have to get like, it's just literally more people. It's easier to seat 2 people than it is to seat a bunch of people. And then, it's sort of like, I think if you are looking at a family with kids, you're going like, okay, these grownups are going to have like a grown-up entree probably. They might have like a glass of wine or 2. They might have, all these different things. And then you're looking at a kid and you're like, he's going to get fucking chicken fingers.
It's one
and
of
like
3
maybe
things,
a soda that I'm going to have to refill like 9 times and then like tell him where the bathroom is, and he's like still going to get lost.
It's always, and now it's always shocking. I have several nieces and nephews, and I am always gobsmacked when they have like sophisticated palates, where it's like they take a peek at the kids menu and they're like, okay, well, I'm between the grilled cheese sandwich or the lamb. And you're like, what? They're like, yeah, but it's
okay. You know what, Uncle Andrew, you get the grilled cheese, I'll get the lamb. We'll trade bites.
Yeah, they're like, this comes with sweet potato gnocchi, which is just too desserty for me. Like, I think I'm gonna go with the grilled cheese. I do miss that era of restaurant. I will say also though that like you can't really go home again. Like, I used to think that Applebee's was just the peak. Like we didn't have a really big mall in my town, so my family would go to the Bell. Was the Belknap Mall? It was called Steeplechase. I can't remember what it was called, but it had we would choose. My mom would be like, we can either do Applebee's or Taco Bell. And my brothers were always team Taco Bell, and I was always like, I'm looking to sit down. Like,
yes, I immediately had the exact same thought. I want to sit down.
Yeah.
I want an experience.
I want a full experience. I want a friendly waitress. I want a color. Like that, like it just the concept of choosing a fast food place over an Applebee's to me, that was like my first form of snobbery, I think. I was like, no. I want a cup that's not going to be thrown away.
Yeah, I mean, I just think also it's like it's like a treat, right? Like fast food is a treat, and like and like going to like Applebee's or a place like that was a treat. And just to me, like the idea of like we're all gonna go, we're gonna sit down, they're gonna come, they're gonna bring the stuff out, they're gonna take the order, they're gonna whatever. Like that all is just like I'm just maximizing the amount of treat, I feel like. Because I also like fast food. It's not that I didn't like fast food, but like if I had to choose.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Right. And to me it was like, let's make a memory. Like if we were going, like fast food is a treat and that's great, but let's make a memory. Let's go to a place.
Is there something here? Is this analogous to the marshmallow test?
That's the if you eat the marshmallow now, you don't get another one, but if you wait, you get a second marshmallow.
Yeah, I literally, for some reason, I feel like I haven't read a nonfiction book in the past 10 years that doesn't reference it at some point. And I feel like they always draw different conclusions, or they're like, it's actually not that big of a deal or whatever. But like, yeah, exactly. So the marshmallow test is like some for people that haven't read a nonfiction book in the past 10 years, where it was like a behavioral study where they would plop kids down in front of a marshmallow and say, if you cannot eat this marshmallow for like 5 or 10 minutes, you get 2 marshmallows instead of just 1 marshmallow. And it's about like delayed gratification. And then there's a lot of like, I think very sort of over determined whatever's about it, where it's like, the way too Freakonomics-y sort of like, and then the kid that doesn't eat the marshmallow is inevitably going to be president, and the kid that does is inevitably going to go to like supermax prison. And I think all of that, it seems like, is maybe potentially overblown, but I'm wondering, and I say this because this interpretation would speak well of both of us, if the Taco Bell versus Applebee's test is not somewhat analogous, if it's sort of like this child wants more of a longer term experience, as opposed to the quick hit of the 7-layer burrito.
Oh yeah, I have no doubt that the person who chooses Taco Bell has more exciting memories and will have a cooler car. Like I'm willing to accept that. I think like maybe I might be able to like stay somewhere on vacation a couple days longer. Which, it's up to someone to decide I'm still not sure I made the right choice, but that is just a reality of who I am.
But also yours will have been more well-researched.
That's true. I'm not showing up to the tourist traps. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, not at all. Not at all. But while we're sort of in the past, growing up, who do you remember seeing like cooking around you?
So I mean, my mom is a very good cook. I feel like my mom and grandma are very much hostesses. Like I asked my mom kind of recently, like, what do you get the most joy out of? Like, what do you love doing the most? And she was like, hostessing. Like, I just love that very much. And a big part of that for my mom was like always having something on hand to bake or like whip up or throw in the oven if company dropped by, which happened a lot when I was a kid, which is like a funny thing to think about. Yeah. So there were a lot of like kind of party standard foods that my mom and grandma and aunt would make, but really kind of like for the most part, like all the women in my family, whether they were working or stay at home, always like had like 5 or 6 recipes in their back pocket to whip up, which I always really admired. But certainly my mom was the one who did most of the cooking. My dad had like a couple reliable standards for cooking. Um, but most of them were pretty much dad recipes, you know?
Was he a breakfast person?
My,
I
yes.
feel like that's a theme that I've noticed is a lot of people, if they're like, my dad didn't cook very much, which is somewhat common for whatever reason. It's like, but dad would do breakfast, which I didn't
Yeah.
really know was that much of a thing until I started doing the show.
I have some theories. Like, so my dad is from Brooklyn, and I think that a lot of his, I think it's funny, like a lot of his like breakfasty choices, I'm like, as I learned more about like, I don't know what you call it, like Brooklyn cuisine, which I guess is just like an overlap of like Jewish, Italian, and I'll throw Irish in there from when he was growing up, but the Irish aren't very much known for their cuisine. But like there's a lot like knishes my dad really loved. Like he would pick up
Oh.
knishes, which I know is not a standard breakfast food, but that would get kind of thrown into the mix sometimes if my mom was out of town. Sort of in lieu of a hash brown, my dad would like pick up knishes.
I've
Um,
never had a really good knish.
they're hard to find. They're hard to find now. I also think there's some kind of yesteryear romanticization of like what knishes were, but I feel like there's a pretty stark division where it's like some knishes you get are very bready, like that, like that's the sort of thing, and then other ones are a little more like a potato cake. So my dad would do that. My dad was also big into like giant pancakes. Like instead of
Mm.
making you like a stack of pancakes, he'd make you like a giant one, which I thought was the coolest thing in the world. Um, yeah, and my mom is funny because there are like all my friends always loved coming over to my house. Like it was my house is one of the hangout houses because my mom had like kind of like block party food on lock, you know?
Ah.
Like and some of them are weird, some of them are kind of weird recipes. There's one that always sounds horrific, but I'm sorry, it's just one of the most delicious things. I guess you'd say it's kind of like a teriyaki dish, but and I know I'm going to describe it. It's going to be, you know what? No, if you like Hawaiian pizza, I think you'll understand. So
I do.
it's chopped up sautéed hot dogs and pineapple chunks, and they have to be like fresh cut pineapple. I mean, I guess you could do the canned stuff, but she didn't really. And then it's served in like a sort of teriyaki sauce, and you get like a little bit of pineapple, a little bit of hot dog, and it is one of the most
That sounds
satisfying
great.
flavors. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's one of, and then also like the classic like cocktail meatballs, the like what is it,
Hmm.
grape jelly and chili sauce, and then you just like heat that up and mix it together. These aren't like high culinary. This isn't anything that like comes from a culinary school, but
Yeah,
there.
but it also feels like the kind of thing where it's like if you end up going to, it feels like the kind of thing where it's like maybe you're like, going over to your friend's place, like in your friend from college, you're like back at some function at their house because you didn't like go home for the holidays or something, and then
Right.
you're like, oh, okay, and then you don't really know anybody, and your friend is like caught up doing something, and then before you know it, you've eaten like 5 of those meatballs, and you're like, this is the best thing I've ever had.
Well, and that's
Oh,
that's
also you're high. I forgot to say. I
Right,
forgot
very
that was
important.
implicit. I think is that you guys got high like behind the garage, but that stuff is all wonderful. I mean, it's its own like genre of food, like you said. It's like like block party food is such a perfect way to describe it.
Yeah, and I think my great grandfather, he has a very bizarre story that doesn't sound true, but it is, where his parents died. He lived in the middle of nowhere in Indiana. His parents died. He ran away with the circus and
Whoa.
played the drums in the circus for his whole like childhood and adolescence. And I believe then the circus was like, we'll either send you to college or we'll give you money to start a business. And he started a chain of restaurants in the Midwest.
Whoa.
I believe called Uncle Roy's. His name was Leroy. And he like truly like in a wild turn of events became a millionaire. Had my grandma, and then the Great Depression happened. He lost all of his money. And then I forget, there's some diversion here. I forget if this was before or after, but he briefly was the head chef at the Palmer House, which I now think is a Hilton in Chicago. I feel like it's where everybody like auditions for college who lives in the Midwest. Like if you're auditioning for NYU or something and you don't want to go to New York, you like audition at the Palmer House.
Oh, interesting.
And so then there are these like funny dishes that are sort of swirled into like our family recipe book that are like very old fashioned but very elaborate recipes. That you would never make now because it just is like, it would just be too involved. But occasionally some of those popped up in my childhood. And so, yeah, it's funny to have this mix of like very sort of like fun, like 1960s, 1970s food. And then like something incredibly old fashioned in a cream sauce.
Is there, I was going to say, is there one that like stands out to you?
So my mom she still does it every Christmas. It's a prime rib recipe. And I don't know that. All I know is that the process of like what goes on the prime rib and how it's cooked is a very intense, long process where it's like everyone's just got to stay out of the kitchen. It's one of those things where it's like it's like the oven has to be a little bit open for a certain point, but it has to be like an exact amount open. And every new house you go to, you have to like figure out how the oven works, which I'm like, you
have to like, you just inevitably like, there's like 3 prime ribs that you're not even going to get to eat. Those are just the ones you use to calibrate your oven.
Yes. And the other one, which I think has kind of had I don't know. I feel like I've seen a lot of like YouTube recipes for it, but fondant potatoes, which do you know about these?
I don't. They sound great though.
Yeah, it's funny. I've never actually seen them made, but I think the trick of it is, so they're very creamy on the inside with very crisp on the outside, and it's a whole potato that you slice, I believe, into like a cube, or something like roughly a cube, but it has to be completely flat on both sides, and then you turn it gradually in the oven. And something, I feel like there's a part of it which is boiled and then fried and then baked. It's like there's a whole rigmarole around it. But that was something that was like a very rare thing that would be had. But that's a recipe that I remember. And I don't know whether that, because I think, again, primarily my great-grandpa's restaurant, he like specialized in pies, I think.
Oh.
So some of these were just like recipes he had picked up. But yeah, then obviously the chain went under. But yeah, there are some like funny remnants, and then there's a lot of just like Depression era recipes that have worked their way. Like there's one I think in England they call it Welsh rabbit, but in my family we called it ring tum diddy, which I don't
just
know.
Your family?
Yeah, I mean I've looked up, and I think other people call it rink tum diddy. Okay. My family firmly calls it rin tum diddy.
Okay.
And it's, I think essentially what it is it's like you make a cheesy roux with like tomato paste, but we did sort of like a more like busy mom with 4 kids version, which was like pre-made tomato soup with like caramelized peppers and onions and cheddar cheese, and you mix it all together and you pour it over crackers. And then you kind of like,
sounds great.
I mean, listen, it's for kids, for like picky kids.
Oh yeah.
It uniformly was like always a big winner. But yeah, that's one of those comfort foods that like I would never serve to anybody, but I do love making for myself now.
So is the name Welsh rabbit in that context, is that like a slur against Welsh people?
I'm sure it
like,
is.
Is it weird? They're like, they think this is rabbit. They're idiots. Or like,
I think it's about how maybe poor Welsh people are. I think I think that was probably the mean origin of it. But hey, I probably would 9 times out of 10 prefer this Welsh rabbit to like an actual rabbit, you know?
Sure. And we in no way want to even know the origin of the Rink Tum Diddy one. That one has got to be like, it's like, oh, you think Welsh Rarebit is racist.
Well, that's the thing. I think Rin Tum Diddy has to be something about making fun of Irish people, I would assume. And it's funny because my assumption was always that it came from my dad's side of the family, who's almost entirely Irish. And so it was a big shock when I realized, like, no, this is a mom's side of the family thing.
So do any Uncle Roy's restaurants, like, did they survive for very long? Did they all go under when he also lost his money?
Yeah, I think directly after the crash, they lost everything. I think everything closed. We have some like old postcards of his shop fronts, which yeah, and I mean there are a lot of, my grandma had a ton of like very charming stories about, like, I think maybe they lasted for a little bit into the Depression. We have a picture of his storefront that says like, "Come in or we'll both starve." Which is kind of a fun, that's sort of like that's sort of a Depression era version of like, sorry, we're open, like one of those signs now. Yeah, but and his other big thing too, which again is like he was a circus man, and so I think like he liked showmanship. And
sure.
one of the things he would do is, like, on his way to and from work, he would have brought like 5 sandwiches with him to just pass out to random people. Be like, if you like that sandwich, then you'll love my restaurant. It's just like a very funny. He sounds like a very interesting guy.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. That's really, I don't know. That's neat, and it's also it's interesting to think of, or I don't know. It's like humbling or something to think of somebody going from like, I have all my own restaurants, and then now I'm the chef at this hotel. You know what I mean?
Right. And then I don't know. I think sadly he like died in the like early 40s. So I don't know that it went great for him, but I can't remember whether he worked at the Hilton before or after he opened the pie shop. And now this is why you should like ask your grandparents questions and record them. Yeah. Now I'm going to have to ask my parents about that.
You should ask your parents or ask your grandparents and record them 1,000,000%. But also, it's all, I think part of what you're doing right now where you're going like, maybe it was that, or maybe it was this. It's like, yes, they will maybe have an answer, but there's also no guarantee that they're not doing what you're doing. And sort of
exactly.
going like, wait, but I think it was, that's like, this feels like something that you would enjoy. This feels very farmer to me. I don't know why. And maybe I've told you this before, but there is a dog from my childhood that I was convinced was a like family dog that one of my relatives had that no one remembers.
Oh no.
And it was a white dog named Ingemar. Not Ingmar.
No.
And maybe I'm doing my own like ringtum ditty on it.
No.
Maybe it was Ingmar, not Ingemar, but I remember it being Ingemar, a big fluffy like white dog.
Whoa.
And a few years ago, I was saying to because I kind of thought it was my aunt's, because my aunt has had many dogs throughout her life, or I thought maybe it was her mom's, my grandma's or whatever. And I was like, yeah, you remember the whatever, Ingemar, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And she was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, yeah, it was a big white dog. And she was like, no, we didn't have a dog like that. And then I've since asked like my aunt on my other side of the family, and she has no recollection of it. So there is just a like phantom dog from my childhood that may just be a weird memory artifact or like foreshadowing of a stroke that I'm going to have in 20 years. But
it's the name that gets like,
isn't it?
Because there's no way you would like, I could see maybe as a child you seeing a recurring dog that like becomes entrenched in your memory, but then Ingemar is such a specific thing. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, and I just that's the thing too, is it's sort of ingrained in like, and I'm not, it's gotten so nonspecific now, and especially so because it's sort of been, my family has tried to disconfirm this dog over and over again. But it is to me steeped in that like childhood feeling of like, you know how just like, I'm sure if I just said like, think of being at your grandma's house or something, you would just have like a set of like sights and sounds and sort of just a sort of milieu that goes along with that. Like that dog is just so ingrained in that kind of world to me that I just like, I know that it existed and no one knows what the fuck I'm talking about.
It's very Wrinkle in Time. I mean, like a white
Right?
dog named Ingmar that doesn't exist. Like that feels like you are definitely like I can see the book cover, like the 1980s book cover of that book.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I completely feel that way. And I also feel like I think at this point, I just have to keep telling people about it and eventually, hopefully, like get to write like some New Yorker essay about it that then somebody who was in like Arizona in the 80s will be like, oh yeah, I knew Ingmar, that belonged to, and it'll be something completely, not at all what I remember or think it was. Like it was a tiny brown chihuahua. And also I'm just scamming you. I'm a scammer who saw this and now I'm going to try to take your money.
It is wild, the place, like childhood dogs that were not your own, like the space they occupy. I feel like one of my most vivid memories as a kid was at a Thanksgiving dinner at my Aunt Ann and Uncle Skip's. And, I have this very clear memory. I remember like everything like sensorily about it. And I was sitting under their dining room table feeding their dog Ben paper napkins, like just napkin after napkin after. And Ben was the happiest dog imaginable. Yeah, but and it's like that for me, I'm like, wow, that's such an important moment in my life. But like, why would that be the thing that I remember?
Yeah, I know what did you guys have dogs yourself?
I had one childhood dog. It's kind of it maybe is one of the more defining stories of my childhood. My family got a dog. I wanted a dog all my life as a little kid. When I was 9 years old, we got a yellow lab named Grit, and we
Great
got
name.
it. I really, I have to say, like, I nailed the name. I really nailed the name.
Absolutely.
And the name comes back into play in a really tragic way. I'll try to give you the abbreviated version. We got the dog because I was having a surgery on my feet where I'd be like off my feet for like 6 to 8 months. And my parents were like, this would be a great thing to kind of distract him from like this upcoming. So we got Grit. I had the surgery. We went through the whole process. I was in like recovery. I had leg splints. And like, I'm trying to think of the most efficient way to say this. So on my 10th birthday, my parents took me to a theme park with some friends called Canopy Lake Park in New Hampshire. And I broke my back on a roller coaster for the first time. It also happened a second time in my 20s. But I broke my back on a roller coaster. I didn't really realize it was broken. We went to a doctor. The doctor was like, his back is broken. So they put me in a back brace. On the drive back to our house in New Hampshire, my parents were like, okay, we have some rough news. Tomorrow we're moving to Florida. And when we get back home today, we've got to give the dog away.
Oh,
Really devastating. I mean, I understand in theory why they had to do what they did. We were moving into a house that wasn't ours. They felt weird about bringing like a huge 80-pound yellow lab with us. And one of my dad's law partners was like, we'll take the dog. So I get home, they give the dog away. It's absolutely devastating. My parents also said that no one in Florida had a dog because it's too hot.
come on, guys.
Yeah, we could have done a little better with that one.
Also, it's just sort of like talk about a whatever. What's the opposite of a self-fulfilling prophecy? Just like self-defeating.
I mean, because of course, the day we drove into our neighborhood in Florida, everyone was out front playing with their dogs. Anyway, the non-food related end of the story is years later when I was in college, my mom reached out because my brother who had moved back to New Hampshire was like, I read this article in the newspaper. Because what we knew about Grit, devastatingly, was that the family we gave him to then gave him to another family. And that family renamed him Rainbow, which I was like, I have nothing against the name Rainbow for a dog, but you can't mess with a dog's oeuvre so significantly. You can't decide now the dog is just Rainbow when it was Grit for 4 years.
No. And it's not, it's even if you can, they're just not, that's a different dog. Rainbow's a different dog.
And again, probably a great dog. I can see that being a great dog name. But Pete was like, what did that family who ended up with Grit rename him to be? And my mom was like, Rainbow. And he was like, I'm reading this newspaper article in Laconia about a dog named Rainbow who pulled a little kid out of the frozen lake who'd fallen through the ice. And then he died of a heart attack. And sure enough, it was Grit who saved the little kid. And then my mom called me as my freshman year, and she was like, so you see, if we hadn't given away Grit, that little boy would be dead. And I was kind of like, well, there would have been another dog. I don't know. I don't know that we can make that assumption so directly. That feels a little neat to me. But yeah, that was my one dog for my life. And then I kind of punished my parents for several years afterwards by running a dog sitting service. But then that got to, people were giving me some really difficult dogs. There was one, I got really, this is something that I think a lot about. I was given a Chihuahua for 3 weeks, a tiny Chihuahua. After they had dropped it off, they were like, oh, by the way, in the bag we've left, the Chihuahua, whose name was Little Bear, has a vaginal infection, and you need to apply. It was essentially like an enema for a dog that I had to apply twice a day for 3 weeks. It was, I was 11 years old. I was like, I am not qualified to do this. And I think after that, I was like, okay, my parents have suffered enough. I'm not going to run this dog sitting service anymore.
Yeah. Isn't it? I mean, like it seems like a great idea to leave. It's sort of like, yeah, the kid next door can just sit, can dog sit, it'll be great for them. It'll be cute. And then also it'll cost us what, $15 right. Instead of like actively boarding the dog.
Yeah, I thought I was making a killing. Yeah, I think it was like $8 a week I was charged. I mean, it's mind blowing to me.
I had a neighbor. We had a neighbor that this is also sort of like I've known people since who have been homeschooled. Like obviously this year, so many kids have been a little or a lot homeschooled, and maybe will continue to be. But we had these folks next door who the kids were homeschooled, and this has colored completely unfairly my impression of homeschooler people on just such a visceral level through no fault of their own. They were totally nice. They were normal. They were all this stuff, but they like, I remember they went out of town and they were like, do you want to, dog sit for us? And I was like, sure. And I had no idea like what that really entailed. And they were like, yeah, so just, and I went over and the mom gave me the whole tutorial. Okay. You just come in and you go through the door and you feed to get the cup out and put the food in the thing. And I'm going like, this is great. Cause I never had a dog growing up, but I was like, this will be awesome. I can totally do this. And, just really chuffed, feeling really chuffed. Yeah. And then coming into the house and just like the worst smell hitting me, just like so, and I can still it's one of those like very cut right deep to the center of my brain smells that I can still think about it and I can just conjure it in a second. And the dog had just shit everywhere, had like the worst diarrhea everywhere. This is the nice podcast about food and home cooking. You're welcome, everyone. And I think it was, thinking back on it now, I think we maybe ended up having to bring it to the vet. I genuinely don't remember. Also, my aunt, who I thought for a while had Ingemar, but in fact did not, was a vet. So maybe I was just able to ask her. She came over and looked at the dog. There was some solution for it. Looking back on it now, I'm just like, and having had more pets since, I was like, the dog is like mad or sad that the people are gone. So it has anxiety. And so it's like shitting everywhere. But just like and then just the realization of sort of like going back to my parents and being like, the dog like pooped everywhere. And then being like, okay, so yep. Go clean it up, and being like, wait, but no, right? Like I was not shown that in the tutorial, and them just being like, no, you have to go clean it up, and having that sort of like visceral kid, like unfairness feeling from having to do that. And that has since completely unfairly, that now is just seared into my brain as my homeschool association, right? For no reason, had nothing to do with it.
I think certainly, homeschool is a rich tapestry, but that there's something about that feels right. I feel like if you were to gauge outside of pandemic times, I think very often, maybe homeschool, this is maybe an unfair assumption. I feel like homeschooled friends of mine always just had multiple dogs.
Interesting.
Which might be an element of like teaching kids responsibility in the like if you got more kids around to like help walk the dog, it can kind of be built into an education. It makes sense that there'd be more dogs. I mean that doesn't speak to the defecation problem, but yeah.
Also,
I mean,
like they're not going to have a class turtle to like bring home for over one weekend.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to have that on hand. I will say now, Chris and I are both dog people. I can't fathom having one unless I had a yard. That's no judgment on anyone who lives in an apartment and has a dog. It for me personally is just like I want to have the option to be like, okay, like go run around for a bit on top of walking them. But I mean, and of course it's been a while, but when friends come over for dinner or something and bring dogs, to me, it's always kind of like a housekeeping test of like how many crumbs the dog can find on the kitchen floor, like what the scraps are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there was this was like a year ago, but like one of the most horrific things was, dog made a beeline for like under the fridge and I was like, oh God. And then was just like crunching. And I was like, what does it have? And I looked and I had realized there was just a time where I had spilled some raw, like pasta shells on the ground, and I just couldn't keep track of where they all went. And I do think when you have a dog, the act of cooking, there's a certain amount of confidence you have of like, whatever I drop is just going to get eaten. Like that's completely fine. And that is a thing as a home cook that I miss very much about having a dog around, where it's just like, like you still have to clean your floor, obviously, but like the surface things are going to be taken care of.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the thing with like with our cats even. I mean it's a joke, but it's sort of like, okay, we kind of finished everything. We put the plates in the sink and then yeah, we're going to do dishes, but then the cats are inevitably going to before that going to like come in and start licking a plate and we just call it, it's just like, oh, right. They're doing their chores.
Yep.
Like having a thing where you're saying that animals are helping and they're not is really funny, but doing it when they're a little bit helping is also very funny.
Yeah. I mean, there's something very holistic about having a dog to help clean up.
It's like a Disney movie. It's like everybody. Okay, the birds are bringing her the dress and she's putting it on. You know what I mean? The dogs are licking the plate.
Right.
It's whimsical. But where does speaking of just cooking in general, where does cooking fit in or not fit into your life at the moment?
I mean, I really love cooking. Again, like that was a thing that I really shared with my mom. My brothers are also very good cooks. I think they do it as like a relaxation activity, sort of like a weekend thing. I mean, currently I pretty much do almost all of the cooking. Like Chris, the sort of binary that Chris and I have found is like Chris is better at fixing things and I'm better at like cooking things. I think Chris, like when we watch Great British Bake Off, like Chris is like, oh, I'd be so good at precision stuff, which I would be terrible at. But I feel like I can gauge flavors fairly well together. But that's a thing I'm like still in the process of learning about. I remember like a couple years after I graduated, learning how to make shakshuka and feeling like, well, I am the most talented gourmand imaginable. Like it just something about that. I was like, wow, like it's an unfamiliar name and like cooking an egg in liquid just felt very chic to me.
Oh, absolutely. Well, because also it's like it's so flavorful, and yeah, exactly what you said. You have like this sort of unconventional technique of like I'm gonna crack an egg directly into. I already have been cooking a bunch of stuff, and now I'm gonna crack an egg into it, and that's like toward the end. That's not even like at the beginning. Feels so cool.
And it's funny because that was that was the first time I like went to a specialty grocery. I like bought harissa at like a specialty grocery nearby and was like, wow, okay, this is all really coming together. I mean, now what's interesting is so Chris and I both got COVID like immediately in March, like really early, and both lost our sense of smell and taste for 2 weeks. But this is the wild thing. So mine has returned completely the same as it always was. Chris's sense of taste and smell have returned, except for two things. Head and Shoulders shampoo smells like spoiled milk to him, so he can't use it anymore.
Interesting.
And now he loves Indian food. It is one of
Interesting.
like, I don't know what it is, but like the like wide array of spice profiles in Indian food, which I love, which Chris used to not be so much of a fan of. Now he loves too, which is so, I don't, maybe this is it is completely anecdotal, but I'm curious about, like, from this point forward, if everyone's cooking at home, also the long-term effects of COVID. Let's treat this one as though it's maybe like a more fun and less terrifying one, unlike the others. Like, your palate changing is something very interesting to me.
Oh, absolutely. That's super interesting. I would, exactly what you said. I would love to know, like, why that is. Cause it does, it weirdly, when people talk about the senses of taste or smell, like going away or then changing or whatever with COVID, always makes me think of, like, when people are like, I don't like cilantro, it tastes like soap.
Right. Yes.
You know what I mean?
It's
How
like,
some
could that be?
people,
Yeah.
it's like, that's so strong with them, and other people are like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. And definitely, like you said, one of the lesser, it's like, if that's going to be your main long-term sort of takeaway, is that, like, okay, I can get a different dandruff shampoo and, and like, now I really love Indian food. Fantastic. Absolutely. Welcome to it. But that's so interesting. I wonder why that is. I would not even begin to want to speculate, but yeah, that has definitely been, like, knock on wood, thank God so far have not gotten it. And one of the things that is really scary to me about it is not just this sort of, like, oh shit moment of, wait, I can't taste. Do I have COVID? Oh shit, I do. But the idea that it, like, might not come back or might take a while to come back or after all these other things is just, like, it's not the scariest thing about it to me, but there is something about it because, like most of us, that's just a sense that I really value, for lack of a better term. So, like, I don't know, that all of that is very frightening. Glad to hear he can, taste again.
And of course, yeah, we were very fortunate that way, but yeah, like, I guess in a less existentially frightening way. The other thing that has sort of been, that these past several months have been, like, kind of an opportunity for in home cooking is, like, a lot of sort of durational cooking that just for me involved too many steps, like things that weren't necessarily difficult, but just, like, took a longer time. I'm now sort of, like, introducing, this is a very silly one, but I figured out how to make scallion pancakes, or figured out, I mean, I looked up a recipe and read the recipe. But making one's own scallion pancakes is I love it. I love being able to do that. It takes a long time, but it's so the best.
Cool. Oh, yum. I mean, yeah, I've never made them. Haley has made them before, and I, like them at restaurants, but there's something about making them at home, or somebody making them at home, that just feels like a little magic trick. Oh, they're so satisfying and good.
I know. I feel like it's a good uncle talent to have. Like, that's a thing that that's a thing that I look forward to pulling out. And then, I mean, the other sort of funny thing is, like, I really love, like, stews and sort of, like, hearty, warming meals. And Chris is not so much of a stew person, and it's been, like, a funny but exciting challenge to trying to figure out, like, what are the foods that accomplish what I like about a stew that texturally are still something that Chris would enjoy.
Interesting.
Yeah, which has been, I mean, like, beef bourguignon is, like, next on my list of things because I know that's something he likes. And I love beef bourguignon. It's, like, one of my favorite
things. What does he not like about stew?
I mean, here's the thing. I think, and I get it.
That came out more offended than I meant.
No. I think, and it's in a way that I understand too. I think sometimes in an old-fashioned stew, how we think of it is that everything is overcooked. Like,
sure.
Everything kind of becomes a mush. And that's, that's not necessarily what you want from a stew. Maybe some people do, and I think that's great too. But I think like, something I made recently that he was like, oh, I really like this. And it was helpful to know that it was, like, a variety of textures and temperatures. I made this, like, 5-spice chicken thing over rice with then, crushed cold cucumber salad on top.
Yum.
Which he was like, oh, this is a sort of stew that I like. And I think, yeah, it's all about like everyone has had like a stew sort of thing from their like middle school cafeteria where it's like, oh, this is just sort of a wash of flavors
Right.
in a brown sauce. But yeah, it's been nice to figure out like different, like I like a really thick stew. Like I'm not a thin stew person. Is anyone a thin stew person? Maybe there
I
are
don't
people who
think
are.
so. I think that I mean, maybe like a bureaucrat in an old like Charles Dickens short story. Maybe. I don't know.
But yeah, it's funny you bring up Charles Dickens too, because I do this project every year with friends about Christmas Carol, and this year we've been like looking up all the recipes that are mentioned in A Christmas Carol, which
Cool.
has been very fun. There's this drink that I'm dying to try called Smoking Bishop, which is kind of like mulled wine, except it's much more orange heavy than
Oh,
mulled wine
interesting.
is. That I'm dying to try out. But so many of these recipes are things that are like I'm curious to try them. I imagine it would be incredibly difficult to recreate them as they were back then. But yeah, it is a lot of things that feel like, oh, this is just swimming in melted butter. Like
Sure.
it's not even like the sauce is just melted butter. Um, which I guess if you're in, times of want, like whatever it's going to take to put some meat on your bones in the winter, you're going to love. But yeah, that is always very funny to me. And then like a lot of mixing fruit with meat.
Sure, sure.
They just loved it back then, I guess.
And maybe they were also just like, Look, we need the vitamins, like
Yeah.
we'll take it." But yeah, I don't know why that is either, and those all of those foods are so interesting to me, like when you read like an old book and it's just sort of like, or you read about like, it's a scene in an old book where it's like, and this is like the meal they're having, and it just
Right.
sounds so like, why would you want that in that order? That sounds like too much.
Yeah, there's
But
there's this like 4-page section that's just describing different foods you'd see in a grocery at Christmas time in that era. And one of the weirdest descriptions is not weird, it actually is the like most perfect description. But it just stays in my head as the figs were moist and pulpy, which I'm like, how weird to describe something that way in an attempt to titillate one's senses and be like, what's the most delicious way to describe figs? And land on moist and pulpy.
yeah, where I think about it and I go like, I guess that's not inaccurate,
No, I mean, it makes
but
sense to me.
I just don't think of pulpy as being. And I like pulp. I
Sure.
like a pulpy orange juice. But when I think about pulpy in that context, it just almost feels like it's going to be dry or something, which is what I don't want. And I know that the word moist is in there to counteract that,
I
but
know.
it's
I
not
know.
working.
Yeah, I mean, pulpy to me, I think it's just the word pulpy is too close to like pulpate or like pulsing, which then to me, I'm just imagining like quivering figs. Like, I can't do that.
Okay, but you guys should make quivering figs. I do think that's a crowd pleaser.
People love the
You can
quivering
do it
figs.
cold, you can do it warm. But I should also say, like, you guys, Haley and I have been over at you and Chris's many times. You guys are, I seems like you kind of got the entertaining gene from your mom. You guys are like very much entertainers. You like having like a really fun, like thought out, like dinner party or party with fun food and drinks and different stuff like that. Do you guys have a thing? I mean, obviously that sort of thing is not, or at least like ideally for public health is not really happening right now. Do you guys have one that you're like, oh man, when we can again, this is what we want to do? Is there something that's like on your like
That's
first
such a good
up
question.
list? Insofar as you can say, because I wouldn't want you to have to give any state secrets away.
No states. I mean, yeah, we do love a themed menu. I mean, here's the thing: we got to do right before COVID really hit. You and Haley were there. We did like a little tiki party, which was very fun.
So great.
Which I mean, to me, it's like that Americanization of an idea of what qualifies as tiki is like very amorphous and very possibly very problematic. But I think it invites in a lot of those, like a lot of the mixing of like sweet, sour, savory, like all those things that are very fun. And foods that you would need to eat if you're drinking strong tropical drinks.
Right.
I think stuff like I kind of like an unusual themed party. I mean, you guys are sort of the gold standard in terms of your Oscar night parties, the different pancakes from around the world year. Like that was so amazing. I think for me, what I would be interested to do for another theme party would be to pick an era and maybe pick some of the most, like Chris is a big, like as a kid, he just loved Calamity. And he loved, like, before the movie Titanic came out, he just loved the idea of a huge ship sinking. So maybe a thing to do would be to make, like, the last meal served in the Titanic. You know,
Whoa,
like that might be kind of a fun dinner
that
party.
is really morbid and really, I mean, like, you know, there's something so sort of romantic about it. It's like this doomed thing, but it's very luxurious.
Yeah.
I think you do that before COVID. It's like, okay, I don't know. Maybe I could see somebody being like, whatever. I think after COVID, after like emerging from COVID, it's like we all just went through this big whole thing. It was a whatever. I like it. I like it as a resilience. It's a sort of, it's a celebration of
We've survived.
I think that's so cool. And also just there's something about like trying to like track down or figure out like, how was this made? Why did people like this? You know, adapting it for modern palates, maybe, I think is such a cool, fun idea. And then also, obviously, there's a bunch of knock-on fun stuff of like, what do people wear? What's the entertainment?
Right.
Like all that stuff is like, is so fun. Like that's, you know, I don't know, that sounds really cool. I'm gonna try to catch an invitation to that. We'll see.
You guys will be first on the list. Another thing, and this is something I think I probably get this from my mom because I think my mom loves a themed menu. My mom is big into the solstices, which is a very weird quality to have as an Irish Catholic person. But on the solstices, my mom would make, solstices not so much equinoxes. We wouldn't use any electricity over the course of the day.
Interesting.
And my mom would like make a dinner that just required like flame heat. And it would always like sometimes it would be like real challenges. Then sometimes it would just be sort of like, you know what, we're doing a cookout. But anything that like involves a kettle over a flame, we're not set up for something like that now, but I can see that being a very fun thing to do. Kind of like a wilderness cook. I am just remembering, you and Haley have endured Chris and I sort of our growing pains in becoming hosts, where we had you guys over like before Christmas, and Chris had made this very delicious like puff pastry wreath with things in it, but we put it on wax paper in the oven instead of parchment paper. Do you remember this? And the whole bottom of it was completely fused. And so it was kind of, you were taking a risk. Either you were only going to get the top of the puff pastry or you were going to have to eat some wax paper. And you and Haley were incredibly lovely about it.
I just remember, I don't remember specifically that dish. I remember having a really good time. And I feel like, I don't know, it's always very well thought out and fun. And there's always like good, like themed entertainment. I feel like one time we came over and the Easter parade was on.
That's
with Judy
right.
Garland, which it turns out is a movie that's literally just people being like, boy, can't wait for that Easter parade. And then I think we all realized that then it was like, wait, that was it? The Easter parade happened? What is this movie? What happens next?
It is, that movie is mostly just a line of women coming out in costumes and posing and saying what color they're wearing. It really is.
That's right.
I highly recommend Easter Parade as like a background for a dinner party. I think it's a great choice.
Absolutely. It was, and what you were watching a thing going like, I see now why Easter's not as big of a deal as a holiday. You know what I mean? Like you feel them even then when it was probably a bigger deal, trying to like figure out like what else.
Yeah, I guess this is just an ode to Irving Berlin. You know, there are two Easter songs. Yeah. That's, I mean, I know another theme one that I'm interested in is looking up recipes that were like on the Orient Express, like fancy train recipes.
Yeah.
That's a thing where I'm like, I mean, I'm guessing that's kind of an oyster-heavy menu, which I'm not such a big fan of, but I'm willing to give it a try.
Oh yeah, I mean, I remember, I don't know if it was literally the Orient Express, but I feel like I've made a recipe for chicken chasseur once that I
that makes
remember them
sense.
making
Yeah.
a big deal about how it was a big big like fancy train recipe back in the day. And that did genuinely make it more appealing.
The concept of eating anything on a train that's not like a hot dog or like a microwave pizza, it just is so foreign and interesting to all of us now. I mean, my mom was a Pan Am flight attendant, and to hear about the meals that were served, not even in first class, just in like standard class on like 1970s international flights, is like lobster and sauce. Like, I just can't imagine that now.
Oh my gosh. I mean, yeah, but also, it's the classic thing of like people dressed up. It was a whole different
That's
thing.
very
Like there
true.
was more of a premium placed on, I guess, on the like on the journey, man, And also just I think like whether you're talking about airline food or earlier when you were talking about like Applebee's, has it gotten worse or have we just gotten older? I do think a lot of those things have just actually have gotten worse because of capitalism, of people going like, wait, you'll still fly even if we don't have we don't have the lobster in the sauce. Like you'll pay the same amount of money. Oh, cause you have to. Oh, okay, great. Then there goes the lobster.
I will say in my life, the few times that I have been on a plane that served a meal, I go by my mom's advice, which apparently was true in the 70s and I think is still true now, which is always go for the vegetarian option. It is always going to be better. And often go for the kosher option, which tends to be the most tasty.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think because there has to be some oversight. Like people actually have to think about it. And I think there's a certain degree of freshness that has to be maintained if something is vegetable, or certainly if there are like certain dietary needs that need to be met. I think like by and large now, if you're going with like the meat menu, you're gonna just get like meat in a sauce. Like that's just what you're gonna get. But yeah, I not too long ago, I forget what airline it was, but it was from New York to LA, and it served a meal, and I was like, this is insane. And I ordered the vegetarian meal, and it was I was stunned at how good it was. It was like an eggplant manicotti, and it was like, well, this is perfect.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Oh, that's, man, news you can use, everybody. Next time you can fly and you don't feel like I gotta leave this fucking mask strapped to my face.
Oh God. Yeah.
That is, I literally, as soon as you said that, I was like, okay, I can't wait to do that. Not now, but
please don't do it now, everybody.
First post-vaccine flight up. Andrew, last question. If there was anything that either maybe something that you loved from your childhood, a food or a dish of your childhood, or something that you had that was incredible in a restaurant once, or anywhere in between, just something that you love, and if you could snap your fingers and know how to make it perfectly, what would it be?
Okay. I will say my dad's cousin owns a restaurant in Goshen, New York, and that's called Catherine's, and it has. This isn't an ad for them. I don't even think they're open during the quarantine, but they have this dessert, which is I honestly think it's just called warm vanilla cake, but it is like a single serving vanilla cake that's filled with like I'm not typically a white chocolate person, but it's filled with like a white chocolate cream in like a surrounded with like a raspberry sauce. And something about it is just one of the most delicious things I've ever had in my life. And I've tried as best I can to like recreate the recipe in some way. I don't know what they do to it or like what the alchemy is of getting like the cream just right in the middle of the cake. But yeah, I think that's like my favorite thing I've ever eaten.
That sounds fantastic. I feel like you have to strike a deal with, and just be like, look, we're family. Give me the recipe. I won't make it east of the Mississippi.
That's a very good point. That, you know what? He might agree to that.
I want this for you in no small part because maybe then I'll get to eat it at some point.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm making it to Goshen anytime soon.
Yeah, no, probably not. But yeah, if I get that recipe, you guys are coming over and we'll split one.
Awesome. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for doing this, man.
Thank you, DC.
I really appreciate it.
Oh, this was the best time.
All right, that is it. That is all for this week's episode of Stay for Dinner. Thank you so much to my guest, Andrew Farmer. Thank you to Jason Anderson, who is responsible for my intro song, July 4th, 2004 is the name of that song. Thank you to Owen Ashworth, the amazing advanced bass, who composed the interstitial music that you heard. I have written a couple of novels, The Boy Who Couldn't Sleep and Never Had To, as well as Crap Kingdom. They are both available wherever books are sold. They make fantastic gifts, and they're also available as audiobooks on Audible. Please check them out. And thanks to Sarah Beacon, who both made the art for my podcast and is the co-author of Let's Make Ramen, the book that the Chashu recipe this week and the tonkatsu recipe last week, and everything in this ramen project basically is based off of the book I Love Ramen by Sarah Beacon and Hugh Amano. Thank you to them, and thank you to you for listening. If you haven't already, please rate and subscribe wherever you do that to podcasts. It helps people find the show, and that in turn helps there be more show. And I will talk to you next week. Bye.